The morning air was cold when David Chen woke up in his small wooden cabin. He lived high up in the mountains, far away from the noise and crowds of the city. His cabin was simple but comfortable, with handmade furniture that he had built himself over the years. David was a carpenter, and a good one. His hands were rough from years of working with wood, shaping it into beautiful chairs, tables, and cabinets. David was 38 years old, but sometimes he felt much older. 5 years ago, his wife had died from a terrible illness. Since then, he had lived alone in the mountains, finding peace in the quiet and in his work. He didn't talk much to people anymore. Every few months, he would make the long journey down to the border town to buy supplies, and then he would return to his solitude. Today was one of those days. He packed his old backpack with some money he had saved, pulled on his heavy jacket, and started walking down the mountain path. The journey would take him most of the day. As he walked, he thought about what he needed to buy. Flour, salt, some tools, maybe some fabric. Simple things for a simple life. By late afternoon, David reached the town. It was a strange place, sitting right on the border between two countries. All kinds of people came through here. Merchants, travelers, refugees, and unfortunately, some very bad people too. The market was loud and chaotic. People shouted in different languages, trying to sell their goods. The smell of spices mixed with dust and smoke from cooking fires. David moved through the crowd, keeping to himself. He bought some flour from an old woman, then some nails and screws from a hardware stall. He was looking at some fabric when he heard a commotion near the edge of the market. Curious despite himself, he walked toward the sound. What he saw made his stomach turn. There was a large tent at the edge of the market, and outside it several people were chained to metal posts. They were all young, mostly girls, and they looked terrified and exhausted. Their clothes were dirty and torn. Some had bruises on their faces and arms. David realized with horror what he was seeing. These were human traffickers, selling people like they were animals. He should have walked away. He knew that. Getting involved in something like this could only bring trouble. But his feet wouldn't move. His eyes scanned the faces of the captives, seeing their fear and hopelessness. And then he saw her. She was young, maybe 16 or 17 years old. She had dark hair that was matted and dirty, and her face was thin from hunger. But her eyes caught his attention. They were dark brown, and unlike the others who stared at the ground, she was looking directly at him. There was something in her gaze that wasn't just fear. It was desperation mixed with a tiny spark of hope. David felt frozen. He wanted to look away, to leave this horrible place and forget what he had seen. But before he could move, the girl did something that shocked him. She spoke. "Please," she said, her voice quiet but clear enough for him to hear. "Please, will you buy me?" David's heart pounded in his chest. He glanced around nervously. The trafficker, a large man with a scarred face, was busy talking to another customer. No one else seemed to have heard her. "Please," she said again, her voice cracking slightly. "Buy me and let me serve you. I will work hard. I will do anything. Please don't leave me here." David felt like he couldn't breathe. He shook his head slightly and took a step back. This was too much. He couldn't get involved in this. He was just a simple carpenter. What could he do? He turned and walked away quickly, pushing through the crowd. His hands were shaking. He tried to focus on finishing his shopping, but he couldn't concentrate. Everywhere he looked, he saw that girl's face. Her desperate eyes. Her plea. He went to the tool shop and picked up a hammer he didn't need. He stood in front of the vegetables, staring at them without really seeing them. The sounds of the market faded into a dull noise in his ears. All he could hear was her voice. "Please, will you buy me?" David put down the hammer and walked out of the tool shop without buying anything. He found a quiet corner near an old building and sat down on a wooden crate. He put his head in his hands. What was he supposed to do? If he bought her, wasn't he just participating in this evil trade? But if he didn't, what would happen to her? He sat there for a long time, wrestling with his thoughts. The sun was getting lower in the sky. The market would close soon, and the traffickers would pack up and leave. He had heard stories about what happened to the people who didn't get sold. They were taken across the border to even worse places. Places where they disappeared forever. David thought about his wife. She had been kind and brave. She had always helped people who needed it, even when it was difficult. What would she tell him to do right now? He knew the answer. She would tell him to help that girl no matter the cost. He stood up, his decision made. His legs felt weak as he walked back toward the trafficker's tent. The crowd had thinned out as the evening approached. The scarred man was starting to pack up his things. The girl was still there, chained to the post. When she saw David approaching, her eyes widened with a mixture of hope and fear. David walked up to the trafficker. His mouth was dry. "How much for her?" he asked, pointing at the girl. He hated the words even as he said them. How much for a human being? It made him sick. The trafficker looked at him with cold eyes and named a price. It was almost everything David had saved. All the money from months of selling his furniture. David's mind raced. If he spent all this money, he would barely have enough left for basic supplies. The winter would be hard, but he looked at the girl again. She was watching him with such hope that it broke his heart. "I'll pay it," David said quietly. The trafficker grinned, showing yellow teeth. They completed the transaction quickly. David handed over almost all his money, feeling each bill leave his hand like a piece of his soul. The trafficker unlocked the chain from the post and handed the end to David like a leash. David immediately knelt down and unlocked the shackle from the girl's ankle. Her skin was raw and bruised underneath. She looked at him in confusion. "You're not my property," David said firmly, looking into her eyes. "I'm not buying you to own you. I'm buying you to free you. Do you understand?" The girl stared at him for a moment, and then tears began to stream down her face. She nodded, unable to speak. David helped her to her feet. She was shaky and weak from days of being chained up without proper food or water. "Can you walk?" he asked gently. She nodded again. "Yes, sir." "Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't call me sir," David said. "My name is David. What's yours?" "Amara," she whispered. "Amara," he repeated. "We need to leave this place now. My home is far up in the mountains. It will take us 2 days to get there. Can you make that journey?" "Yes," she said immediately. "I can walk. I will follow you anywhere. You saved my life." David bought some bread and water with his remaining money. As the sun set, they left the market behind and started the long walk up the mountain path. David didn't know what he had just done or how it would change his life. All he knew was that he couldn't have lived with himself if he had walked away. The first night of their journey was difficult. David and Amara walked for several hours after leaving the market, trying to put as much distance as possible between themselves and that horrible place. David was worried that the trafficker might have second thoughts or that someone might try to follow them. The mountain path was steep and rocky, and Amara struggled to keep up. David could see that she was exhausted. Her legs were weak and she stumbled several times on the uneven ground. But she never complained. She just kept walking, determined not to slow him down. Finally, when it was completely dark, David found a small cave off the path where they could rest safely for the night. "We'll stop here," he said, helping Amara sit down on a flat rock. She collapsed gratefully, breathing hard. David could see even in the dim moonlight that she was in bad shape. Her face was pale and her hands were shaking. He pulled out the bread he had bought and broke it in half, offering the larger piece to Amara. She took it with both hands and ate slowly as if she was trying to make it last. David gave her the water flask and she drank carefully, not taking too much. "When did you last eat?" David asked gently. Amara thought for a moment. 3 days ago, I think. They gave us very little food, just enough to keep us alive." David felt anger rise in his chest. How could people treat others this way? He pulled out another piece of bread from his pack and gave it to her. "Eat more. You need your strength." "But what about you?" Amara asked. "I'll be fine. I'm used to going without food sometimes." "You need it more than I do." Amara ate the second piece of bread more quickly. Color started to return to her cheeks. David made a small fire using some dry wood he found near the cave. The warmth felt good in the cold mountain air. They sat in silence for a while, watching the flames dance. "Why did you help me?" Amara finally asked. Her voice was soft, almost afraid of the answer. David was quiet for a long moment, thinking about how to answer. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said simply. "No person should be treated the way you were treated. No one deserves that." "But you spent all your money," Amara said. "I heard the price. That was everything you had." "Money can be earned again," David replied. "But I couldn't live with myself knowing I had walked away and left you there. My wife, before she died, she taught me that. She always said that when you see someone suffering and you have the power to help, you must help. Otherwise, what kind of person are you?" Amara's eyes filled with tears again. "Your wife sounds like she was a wonderful person." "She was," David said softly. "She died 5 years ago." I miss her every day. I'm sorry, Amara whispered. They fell silent again. The fire crackled and popped. After a while, David pulled out a blanket from his pack. Here, wrap this around yourself. It gets very cold at night in the mountains. But what will you use? Amara asked. I have my jacket. I'll be fine. Please take it. Amara wrapped the blanket around her thin shoulders. For the first time since he had seen her at the market, she looked a little bit comfortable. David added more wood to the fire and leaned back against the cave wall. You should sleep, he said. We have a long day of walking tomorrow. Are you sure it's safe here? Amara asked, looking nervously toward the cave entrance. I'll keep watch for a while, David assured her. No one knows we're here. We're far from the main path. You can sleep safely. Amara lay down on the cave floor, using her arm as a pillow. Within minutes, exhausted from everything she had been through, she fell into a deep sleep. David watched her for a moment, this young girl whose life had been destroyed by cruel people. He wondered what her story was. Where was she from? What had happened to her family? But those questions could wait. Right now, the important thing was getting her to safety. David kept the fire going and stayed awake for several hours, listening to the sounds of the mountain. Owls hooted in the distance. The wind rustled through the trees, but there were no sounds of people following them, no voices or footsteps. Finally, when he was sure they were safe, David allowed himself to sleep too. They woke early the next morning with the first light of dawn. David's body was stiff from sleeping on the hard ground, but Amara looked better. She had slept deeply, and some of the exhaustion had left her face. They ate the last of the bread and shared the remaining water. How far is your home? Amara asked as they started walking again. If we walk steadily, we should reach it by tomorrow evening, David said. The path gets steeper from here, but the air is cleaner and the views are beautiful. As they climbed higher into the mountains, the landscape changed. The trees became taller and thicker. Birds sang in the branches above them. A small stream ran alongside the path, providing them with fresh water. Despite the difficult circumstances, Amara seemed to relax a little. She looked around at the nature surrounding them with something like wonder in her eyes. I grew up in the mountains too, she said quietly. Not these mountains, but similar ones. In my village, we had forests and streams like this. What happened to your village? David asked carefully. He didn't want to push her, but he wanted to understand. Amara was quiet for a long time as they walked. David thought she might not answer, and he was about to tell her it was okay, she didn't have to talk about it. But then she started speaking, her voice barely above a whisper. There was a war, she said. Different groups fighting over territory and resources. Our village was caught in the middle. One night soldiers came. They burned our houses. They killed many people. My father tried to protect us, but they shot him. My mother told me to run and hide in the forest. I did. I hid for 2 days, but I never saw her again. I never saw any of my family again. David's heart ached for her. He wanted to say something comforting, but what words could possibly help? I wandered for weeks, Amara continued. I survived by eating berries and drinking from streams. I tried to reach the border, hoping to find help. But instead I was caught by bad men. They put me in a truck with other girls. They took us to different places, kept us locked up. Then they brought us to that market. I was there for 5 days before you came. I'm so sorry, David said. No one should have to go through what you went through. Sometimes I thought about giving up, Amara said. But something inside me refused to die. When I saw you at the market, I don't know why, but I felt like maybe you were different from the other men who looked at us. Your eyes were kind, so I took a chance. I spoke to you. I'm glad you did, David said. I almost walked away. I was scared and didn't know what to do, but I couldn't forget your face. They walked in companionable silence for the rest of the morning. David pointed out different plants and animals along the way, teaching Amara their names. She was intelligent and remembered everything he told her. At midday, they stopped by the stream to rest and drink water. David caught 2 fish with his hands, a skill his father had taught him long ago. He cooked them over a small fire and they ate together. This is the best meal I've had in months, Amara said, eating the fish carefully. Wait until we get to my cabin, David said with a small smile. I have a garden with vegetables and I keep chickens for eggs. We'll have proper meals there. As the sun began to set on their second day of travel, they finally saw David's cabin in the distance. It sat in a small clearing surrounded by tall pine trees. Smoke wasn't coming from the chimney since David had been gone, but the building looked solid and welcoming. That's home, David said, pointing to the cabin. Amara stopped walking and stared at it. Tears began rolling down her cheeks again, but this time they seemed like different tears. Not tears of fear or sadness, but tears of relief. "I have a home again," she whispered. "Even if it's just for a little while, I have a place to be safe." "You can stay as long as you need," David said. "There's no rush for you to go anywhere. You're safe now, Amara, I promise you that. No one will hurt you here." They walked the final distance to the cabin as the first snowflakes of the season began to fall. David unlocked the door and stepped inside with Amara following close behind. The cabin was cold since the fire had been out for days, but it was clean and cozy. There were handmade wooden chairs, a table, a kitchen area, and 2 small bedrooms. "This will be your room," David said, opening the door to the smaller bedroom. "It's simple, but it's warm and private. I'll get the fire going and make us some hot soup." Amara looked around the small room. It had a bed with clean blankets, a small window looking out at the trees, and a wooden chest for storing clothes. To her, after weeks of captivity and terror, it looked like paradise. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for giving me back my life." The first few weeks at the cabin were strange for both David and Amara. They were learning how to live around each other. 2 people who had been alone for so long, now suddenly sharing a space. David was careful to give Amara privacy and space. He never entered her room without knocking, and he made sure she understood that she was free to do as she pleased. But Amara struggled with this freedom at first. She'd been a prisoner for so long that she didn't know how to act like a free person anymore. Every morning she would wake up early and immediately start looking for work to do. She would clean things that were already clean, organize things that were already organized. It was as if she was trying to prove her worth, to justify her existence in the cabin. "Amara, you don't have to do all this," David told her one morning as he found her scrubbing the floor that she had already scrubbed the day before. "You can rest. You can relax. This is your home too now." "But I need to be useful," Amara said, looking up at him with worried eyes. "You spent all your money to save me. I have to repay you somehow." David knelt down beside her. "Listen to me carefully. You don't owe me anything. I didn't save you so that you could be my servant. I saved you because it was the right thing to do. You're not here to work for me. You're here to heal and recover from everything you went through. But then what am I supposed to do all day?" Amara asked. She genuinely didn't understand. For months she had been told what to do every moment. The idea of having free time, of making her own choices, was foreign and frightening to her. David thought about this. "Well, what do you like to do? What did you enjoy before all the bad things happened?" Amara was quiet for a moment, thinking back to her old life. It felt like a different lifetime ago. "I liked to help my mother in the garden," she said slowly. "We grew vegetables and herbs. I was good at making things grow. And I liked to cook. My mother taught me how to make many different dishes." "Then maybe you could help me with the garden," David suggested. "Not because you have to, but because you enjoy it. And if you like to cook, you could cook for both of us. I'm not a very good cook. I usually just make simple things. But only if you want to. It's your choice." The idea that she had a choice was still new to Amara, but she nodded. "I would like that. I would like to work in the garden and cook. It would make me feel normal again." So they developed a routine together. David would spend his days in his workshop building furniture. He had several orders from people in the town that he needed to complete. The workshop was a separate building next to the cabin, filled with tools and the smell of fresh wood. Amara would work in the garden, which had become overgrown during the winter months when David had been too busy to tend it properly. Amara discovered that she had a real talent for growing things. She cleared away the weeds and dead plants, prepared the soil, and planted new seeds. She sang to herself while she worked, old songs from her village that she hadn't thought about in months. The physical work was good for her. It made her body strong again and gave her mind something to focus on besides the terrible memories. In the evenings, she would cook dinner for both of them. At first her meals were simple, but as she regained her strength and confidence, she became more creative. She used the vegetables from the garden, eggs from the chickens, and herbs that grew wild on the mountain. David was amazed by her cooking. It was far better than anything he had eaten since his wife died. They would eat together at the wooden table David had made. At first these meals were quiet. Neither of them was used to talking much. But slowly they began to share stories. David told Amara about his wife, about how they had met and fallen in love, about building the cabin together. Amara told David about her childhood in the village, about her parents and siblings, about the life she had lost. One evening, about a month after Amara had arrived, David brought up something that had been on his mind. "I've been thinking," he said carefully. "I know a social worker in the town. She helps people who have been through difficult situations like yours. She might be able to help us find your family, or at least find out what happened to them." Amara's face lit up with hope, but then just as quickly, that hope faded. "Do you think any of them are still alive?" "I don't know," David said honestly. "But don't you think it's worth trying to find out?" Amara nodded slowly. Yes, I would like to know. Even if the news is bad, at least I would know." The next week, David made the long journey down to the town. He went to see the social worker, a kind woman named Rita who had helped people in the region for many years. He told her Amara's story, and Rita promised to do what she could to help. She would contact organizations that kept records of refugees and displaced people from the conflict. But Rita also told David something he had been afraid to hear. "You need to be careful," she said. "What you did was noble, but people might not understand. A single man living alone with a young girl. It might look suspicious to some people. You should register her presence with the authorities and make sure everything is documented properly." David felt worried. He hadn't thought about how it might look to others. He had only thought about saving Amara, but Rita was right. He needed to make sure everything was done correctly, so no one could accuse him of anything improper. Back at the cabin, he explained this to Amara. She became frightened. "What if they take me away? What if they put me in some kind of institution?" "I won't let that happen," David promised. "We'll do this the right way with proper documentation. Rita is going to help us. She understands what happened. She knows I'm trying to help you, not hurt you." Over the next few weeks, Rita came to visit the cabin several times. She interviewed Amara, documented her story, and helped register her with the local authorities. She also brought news. She had found records of Amara's village and the conflict that destroyed it. Many people had died, but there were also survivors who had made it to refugee camps. "We haven't found any of your immediate family members yet," Rita told Amara gently, "but we're still searching. There are several camps we haven't checked yet. Don't give up hope." Amara tried to stay hopeful, but as the weeks passed with no news of her family, she began to accept that they might be gone. The grief was heavy, but she was learning to carry it. She had David now and this new life on the mountain. It wasn't the life she had planned, but it was a life. She was safe, she was free, and she was healing. Winter came early that year. Snow began to fall heavily, covering the mountain in a thick white blanket. The cabin was cut off from the town for weeks at a time, but inside it was warm and cozy. David kept the fire burning constantly. Amara had stocked the pantry with preserved vegetables from the garden. They had plenty of firewood and supplies to last the winter. During the long winter evenings, David taught Amara new skills. He showed her how to read better. She had learned the basics in her village school, but David helped her improve. He had several books in the cabin, and Amara read them eagerly. She was hungry for knowledge, for anything that could help her understand the world better. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Amara reading a book and David carving a piece of wood, she looked up at him. "David, can I ask you something?" "Of course," he said. "Why do you live alone up here? I mean, I understand you were sad after your wife died. But don't you get lonely?" David set down his carving and thought about the question. "Yes, I get lonely sometimes," he admitted. "But after she died, I couldn't stand being around other people. Everyone wanted to give me advice or tell me how to feel. Up here, I could be alone with my grief. I could heal in my own way at my own pace. And now?" Amara asked. "Are you still healing?" David smiled slightly. "I think I've been healing without realizing it. Having you here has been good for me, Amara. It's reminded me that life goes on, that there's still good in the world, still people worth caring about." Amara smiled back. "You saved my life, David. But I think maybe I'm helping save yours too in a different way." That winter, something shifted between them. They were no longer just a man who had rescued a girl and a girl who was grateful. They were becoming family. Not in the traditional sense, but in the way that matters most. They cared about each other. They looked out for each other. They had created a safe space where both of them could heal from their past wounds. As spring approached and the snow began to melt, Amara stood at the window of the cabin one morning. looking out at the emerging green landscape. She felt different than she had when she first arrived, stronger, more hopeful. The nightmares still came sometimes, but they were less frequent now. The fear that had consumed her was slowly being replaced by something else. Not quite happiness yet, but maybe the beginning of peace. David came to stand beside her at the window. "The garden will need a lot of work when the ground thaws completely," he said. "I can't wait," Amara replied. "I want to plant even more vegetables this year, and maybe some flowers too. My mother always said that a garden without flowers was like a meal without salt. It might be good enough, but it was missing something that made it special." "Flowers it is then," David agreed. "Whatever you want to plant, we'll plant." They stood there together, looking out at the promise of spring, both of them grateful for the unexpected family they had found in each other. Spring brought warmth and new life to the mountain, but it also brought something unexpected for Amara. As the world around her bloomed and grew, the darkness inside her seemed to grow stronger too. The nightmares that had been fading during the winter came back with a vengeance. She would wake up screaming in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. In her dreams, she was back in the chains, back in that dirty tent at the market, back in the truck with the other girls listening to their cries. Sometimes she dreamed of her village burning, of her father falling, of her mother's voice telling her to run. The first time it happened, David came running to her room, worried that something was wrong. He found her sitting on her bed, trembling and crying, her hands covering her face. He stood in the doorway, unsure what to do. "Amara, are you okay? I heard you scream." She looked up at him, her eyes wild with fear. For a moment, she didn't seem to recognize him. Then awareness came back, and she realized where she was. Safe. In the cabin. "Not in danger. I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry I woke you. It was just a bad dream." "You don't have to apologize," David said gently. "Do you want to talk about it?" Amara shook her head. She couldn't find the words to describe the terror she had felt. David understood. He brought her a glass of water and sat in the chair by her door for the rest of the night, keeping watch like a guardian, making sure she knew she wasn't alone. But the nightmares continued. Some nights were worse than others. David began to recognize the signs. Amara would become quiet during the day, withdrawn into herself. She would stare off into the distance, lost in memories she couldn't escape. Those were the nights when the dreams would come. One evening, about 2 months into spring, David decided to try something different. After dinner, instead of going to their separate rooms, he asked Amara to sit with him by the fire. "I want to tell you something," he said. "After my wife died, I had nightmares too. Different from yours, but just as terrible. I would dream that I could have saved her, that if I had done something different, she would still be alive. The guilt ate at me like a disease." Amara listened, surprised that David was sharing something so personal. "The nightmares went on for almost 2 years," David continued. "I thought they would never stop. But then one day I realized something. The dreams weren't just about her death. They were about all the things I had never said to her, all the feelings I had kept locked inside. Once I started talking about it, about her, about how much I missed her and how angry I was that she was gone, the nightmares started to fade." "Who did you talk to?" Amara asked quietly. "Myself, mostly," David admitted with a sad smile. "I would sit here by this fire and just talk out loud as if she could hear me. It probably sounds crazy." "It doesn't sound crazy," Amara said. "It sounds like you were trying to heal." "That's exactly what it was," David said. "And I think maybe you need to do something similar. Not talking to yourself necessarily, but talking about what happened to you. All of it. The parts you've told me and the parts you haven't. The memories that wake you up at night." Amara felt her chest tighten with fear. "I don't know if I can." "You don't have to do it all at once," David said. "And you don't have to tell me if you don't want to. You could write it down if that's easier. Or you could tell Rita when she visits next. But keeping it all locked inside, it's poisoning you, Amara. I can see it." Amara sat quietly for a long time, staring into the flames. Finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "There were other girls with me. In the truck. In the places where they kept us locked up. Some of them were younger than me. One was only 12 years old." David listened without interrupting, his face serious. "They did terrible things to some of the girls," Amara continued, tears starting to fall. "I tried to protect the younger ones. I would offer to take their punishments. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. There was one girl, her name was Lily. She was so small and scared. She cried all the time. I would hold her at night and sing her songs my mother used to sing to me. You were brave, David said softly. I wasn't brave enough, Amara said, her voice breaking. One night Lily got very sick. She had a fever and couldn't stop shaking. We begged the men to get her a doctor, but they didn't care. They said she was worthless if she was sick. The next morning Lily didn't wake up. She just died there in that filthy room with no one who loved her around her. Amara broke down completely, sobbing so hard that her whole body shook. David moved closer and carefully put his arm around her shoulders, offering comfort without words. She leaned against him and cried for Lily, for all the other girls, for her family, for herself. They sat like that for a long time. When Amara's tears finally stopped, she felt exhausted but also lighter somehow, as if telling the story had released some of the poison that David had talked about. There's more, she said quietly. So much more that I remember. Things that I see when I close my eyes. You don't have to tell me everything tonight, David said. But whenever you're ready, I'm here to listen. And Amara, what happened to Lily and the other girls? That wasn't your fault. You did what you could. You were just a child yourself, thrown into an impossible situation. But I survived and they didn't, Amara said. Why did I get to live when they died? It was a question David had asked himself many times about his wife. Why did she have to die when he got to live? He knew there was no good answer. I don't know why some people survive and others don't. But I do know that you surviving doesn't mean you did anything wrong. And maybe the best way to honor those girls is to live a good life, to be happy, to not let the evil that was done to you destroy who you are. Over the next few weeks, Amara began to open up more. Sometimes she would talk to David. Other times she would write in a notebook that Rita had brought her. Slowly, painfully, she began to let out all the darkness that had been festering inside her, and as she did, the nightmares became less frequent. They didn't disappear completely, but they lost some of their power over her. David also shared more about himself. He told Amara about the guilt he had carried, about how he had blamed himself for not being able to save his wife. He told her about the dark period after her death when he had barely eaten or slept, when he had thought about giving up on life entirely. What changed? Amara asked. One morning I woke up and saw the sunrise through my window, David said. It was so beautiful, and I realized that my wife would have loved to see it. And I thought about how angry she would be if she knew I was wasting the life she had lost. She always believed that life was precious, every single day of it, so I decided to keep living, not just for myself but for her memory too. That's beautiful, Amara said. It's also hard, David admitted. Some days I still feel guilty for being alive when she's not. But I try to remember that she wouldn't want me to suffer. She would want me to find happiness again. One afternoon, David had an idea. He went to his workshop and came back with a piece of wood and some carving tools. Come here, he said to Amara. I want to teach you something. Amara followed him to the workshop, curious. David showed her how to hold the carving tools, how to work with the grain of the wood instead of against it. Carving is like therapy, he explained. You take something rough and full of splinters and you shape it into something beautiful. You can't rush it. You have to be patient and careful, but in the end you create something that didn't exist before. Amara tried it, carefully cutting away small pieces of wood. At first her hands were clumsy and unsure. But David was patient, guiding her, showing her the techniques. After an hour she had carved a simple flower shape. It's not very good, she said, looking at her work critically. It's your first try, David said. But look at it. You took a plain piece of wood and made something out of it. That's what you're doing with your life too, Amara. You're taking all the pain and trauma and you're carving something new out of it, something that's uniquely yours. Amara understood what he meant. She kept the wooden flower in her room and continued to practice carving. It gave her something to do with her hands when the anxiety became too much. She would sit in the workshop with David, both of them working in comfortable silence, creating things from wood. As spring turned to early summer, Amara began to notice changes in herself. She smiled more easily. She could go whole days without thinking about the bad things that had happened. She still had difficult moments, times when the memories would crash over her like a wave, but she was learning to swim through them instead of drowning. One evening, she and David sat outside the cabin, watching the stars come out. The night was warm and peaceful. Amara felt a contentment that she hadn't thought possible a few months ago. "David," she said suddenly. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For understanding that healing isn't simple or fast. For teaching me that it's okay to be broken and that broken things can be put back together, even if they look different than before." David smiled. "You did the hard work yourself, Amara. I just provided a safe place for you to do it. You're much stronger than you think you are." "Maybe we're both stronger than we thought," Amara said. Summer arrived in full force, bringing long sunny days and warm nights. The garden was thriving under Amara's care, producing more vegetables than they could eat. David suggested they could sell the extra produce at the town market, and Amara agreed. It would be good to have some additional income, and she felt ready to face the town again. The first time they went back to the border town together since that fateful day, Amara felt nervous. Her hands trembled as they approached the market area. David noticed and stayed close to her side. "We can leave any time you want," he said quietly. "Just say the word." But as they walked through the market, Amara realized it felt different now. She wasn't chained. She wasn't afraid. She was free, walking beside someone who cared about her. The market was just a market, not a prison. She took a deep breath and relaxed a little. They set up a small table with their vegetables. Amara had arranged them beautifully, making the display colorful and inviting. People came to look, and many bought from them. Amara was polite and friendly with the customers, though she stayed quiet and let David do most of the talking. Everything was going well until an older woman stopped at their table. She looked at David, then at Amara, then back at David with suspicious eyes. "Isn't she a bit young to be living with you?" the woman asked bluntly. David felt his stomach drop. "She's staying at my cabin temporarily. I'm helping her after she went through a difficult situation." The woman said, her voice full of doubt. "That's what they all say. A man your age with a girl her age living alone in the mountains. Doesn't look right to me." She walked away without buying anything. David and Amara looked at each other, both feeling uncomfortable. But they tried to ignore it and continued selling their vegetables. However, throughout the day, David noticed other people whispering and pointing at them. The looks weren't friendly. On their way out of town, they stopped at the general store to buy supplies. The owner, a man David had known for years, served them but seemed cold and distant. "Is everything all right?" David asked. "I don't know, is it?" The store owner replied. "I've been hearing some talk around town about you, David. People are wondering what's really going on up at your cabin." David felt anger rise in his chest. "Nothing inappropriate is going on. I saved Amara from traffickers. I gave her a safe place to stay. That's all." "Maybe that's true," the man said. "But you have to understand how it looks to people. You should have reported it to the authorities from the beginning." David and Amara left the store quickly. On the walk back up the mountain, they were both quiet, processing what had happened. David felt worried. He hadn't thought about how others would perceive the situation. He had just wanted to help. But now he realized that his good intentions might not be enough. That evening, David contacted Rita, the social worker. He explained what had happened at the market and asked for her advice. "I was afraid this might happen," Rita said over the phone. "People are quick to judge, especially in small communities. We need to make sure everything is properly documented and official. I think you should also talk to the local deputy sheriff. His name is Tom Wilson, and he's a good man. He'll understand the situation if you explain it to him." "What if he doesn't?" David asked. "What if he thinks I did something wrong?" "Then we'll deal with it," Rita said firmly. "But you can't hide from this, David. If people are talking, it's better to face it head on and show them that you have nothing to hide." 2 days later, David made the journey back to town alone. He went to the sheriff's office and asked to speak with Deputy Wilson. The deputy was a tall man in his early 50s with graying hair and kind eyes. He invited David into his office. "I've been hearing some things about you," Deputy Wilson said, sitting behind his desk. "Why don't you tell me your side of the story?" David told him everything, from seeing Amara at the market to buying her freedom to bringing her to his cabin. He explained about Rita's involvement and the documentation they had been working on. He spoke honestly, holding nothing back. Deputy Wilson listened carefully, taking notes. When David finished, the deputy was quiet for a moment, thinking. "That's quite a story," he finally said. "I believe you, David. I can tell you're telling the truth. But I need to interview the girl separately to make sure she confirms your account. I hope you understand." Of course, David said. When would you like to speak with her? I'll come up to your cabin tomorrow if that's all right. I want to see the living situation for myself and talk to her in a place where she feels comfortable. David agreed, though he felt nervous about the visit. What if Amara got scared? What if she said something that was misunderstood? The next day, Deputy Wilson arrived at the cabin in the early afternoon. David showed him around, letting him see both bedrooms, the living areas, the workshop. Everything was clean and proper. There was nothing to hide. Then the deputy asked to speak with Amara alone. David waited outside, pacing nervously. Inside the cabin, Deputy Wilson sat across from Amara at the kitchen table. "Hello, Amara," he said gently. "I'm Deputy Wilson. I'm here to make sure you're safe and that everything is okay. You're not in any trouble and neither is David. I just need to ask you some questions. You can be completely honest with me." Amara was nervous, but she looked the deputy in the eye. She had learned from David that honesty was always the best choice. "I'll tell you everything," she said quietly. For the next hour, Amara told her story. She described the attack on her village, her capture by traffickers, the terrible conditions she had been kept in. She told him about seeing David at the market and making the desperate plea for him to buy her. She explained how David had immediately removed her chains and told her she wasn't his property. "Has David ever hurt you or made you uncomfortable in any way?" the deputy asked directly. "Never," Amara said firmly. "He gave me my own room.
He always knocks before entering."
He's taught me skills and treated me with respect. He saved my life, Deputy Wilson, not just from the traffickers, but from giving up on living. When I came here, I was broken. David gave me a safe place to heal. He's been like a father to me." The emotion in Amara's voice was clear. Deputy Wilson could tell she was speaking from the heart. He asked her several more questions, but each answer confirmed what David had told him. Finally, he called David back inside. "I believe both of you," the deputy said. "What you did was brave and compassionate, David. But the people in town don't know the full story and rumors can be dangerous. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write an official report documenting this situation. I'm also going to talk to some key people in town and set the record straight. It won't stop all the gossip, but it should help." "Thank you," David said, relief washing over him. "There's one more thing," Deputy Wilson said. "Rita mentioned that you've been trying to find Amara's family. I have some contacts with organizations that help refugees. Let me make some calls. Maybe I can help speed things up." Over the next few weeks, Deputy Wilson became an unexpected ally. He did exactly what he promised, talking to community leaders and explaining the situation. He also used his connections to reach out to more refugee organizations. The gossip in town didn't stop completely, but it died down. Most people, once they knew the truth, were sympathetic. Rita continued her visits, bringing Amara books and study materials. She had arranged for Amara to take correspondence courses so she could continue her education. Amara threw herself into her studies, hungry to learn. She was bright and picked up new concepts quickly. One day, Deputy Wilson came to the cabin with news. "We found one of your family members," he told Amara gently. "Your uncle, your mother's brother. He survived the attack on your village and made it to a refugee camp. I have his contact information." Amara's hand shook as she took the paper with her uncle's information. Is he okay?" "He's alive and well," the deputy said. "He's been searching for survivors from your family, too. I told him we found you and he wants to speak with you." That evening, David helped Amara make a call to the refugee camp. When her uncle's voice came through the phone, Amara burst into tears. They spoke in their native language, words tumbling out rapidly. David couldn't understand what they were saying, but he could hear the emotion in both their voices. After the call ended, Amara turned to David with tears still streaming down her face, but she was smiling. "He's alive. My uncle is alive. He told me that my younger brother is alive too. They're together at the camp. My mother and father and older brother didn't make it, but 2 of my family members survived." David felt his own eyes fill with tears. "That's wonderful news, Amara." "My uncle wants me to come to the camp," Amara said. "He wants to take care of me, to rebuild our family." David felt a sudden sadness grip his heart, but he pushed it aside. This was good news. Amara had family. She wouldn't be alone in the world. "Of course you should go to him. Family is important." But Amara was quiet, her expression thoughtful. "I don't know what I want to do," she admitted. "I'm so happy they're alive. I want to see them. But this is my home now, too. You're my family too, David. I don't want to just leave. We'll figure it out, David said. Maybe your uncle and brother could come here, or maybe you could visit them. We have time to decide. The important thing is that you found each other. The weeks following the discovery of Amara's uncle and brother were filled with long phone calls and careful planning. Amara spoke with her uncle several times, learning about what had happened to them after the village was destroyed. Her younger brother, who was only 10 years old, had been with their uncle when the attack happened. They had fled together and eventually made it to the refugee camp. Her uncle wanted Amara to come to the camp, to reunite their family. But the more they talked, the more complicated the situation became. The camp was overcrowded and difficult. There was little food, poor sanitation, and no opportunities for education or work. Her uncle admitted that life there was hard, and he worried about Amara's younger brother growing up in such conditions. One evening, after another long call with her uncle, Amara sat with David at the kitchen table. She looked troubled. "What's wrong?" David asked gently. "My uncle wants me to come to the camp," Amara said, "but he also said something else. He said that if I have a good situation here, if I'm safe and have opportunities, maybe I should stay. He doesn't want me to come to the camp just out of obligation if it means giving up a better life." "What do you want to do?" David asked. Amara was quiet for a long time. "I want to see them. I need to see them with my own eyes, to hug my brother and uncle. But I don't want to live in the camp. I want to stay here. This is my home now. But I also feel guilty for feeling that way." David reached across the table and took her hand. "There's another option we haven't talked about. What if your uncle and brother came here?" Amara's eyes widened. "Here, to the mountain?" "Why not?" David said. "The cabin is small, but we could build another room. Or even build a second small cabin nearby. I have the skills, and with your uncle's help, we could do it quickly. Your brother could go to school in the town. Your uncle could find work, maybe help me with the carpentry business. We could be a family together." "Would you really be willing to do that?" Amara asked, hardly daring to hope. "Amara, you've become family to me this past year. If your uncle and brother are important to you, then they're important to me, too. This mountain has room for all of us." Tears filled Amara's eyes. "I don't know what to say. You've already done so much for me." "Then don't say anything," David replied with a smile. "Just think about it. Talk to your uncle about it. See if it's something they would want." When Amara called her uncle the next day and explained David's offer, there was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Then her uncle began to cry. Through his tears, he said yes. Yes, they would come. Yes, they would build a new life on the mountain. Yes, they would become a family again. It took 2 months to arrange everything. Deputy Wilson helped with the paperwork to get Amara's uncle and brother out of the refugee camp and into the country legally. Rita coordinated with various organizations to provide support. David used his savings and sold several pieces of furniture to pay for their travel costs. Finally, the day arrived when Amara's family would come. David and Amara went down to the town to meet them at the bus station. Amara was so nervous she could barely stand still. When the bus finally arrived and her uncle and brother stepped off, Amara ran to them. The reunion was beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. Amara hugged her uncle tightly, both of them crying. Then she knelt down and hugged her little brother, who had grown taller since she had last seen him. Her brother clung to her, and Amara realized he was crying too. "I thought you were dead," her brother whispered. "Uncle said we had to keep hoping, but I thought I would never see you again." "I'm here," Amara said through her tears. "I'm here and we're together now." "That's what matters." David stood back, giving them space for their reunion. Amara's uncle finally approached him, wiping tears from his eyes. "You must be David," the uncle said in heavily accented English. "I am Chen. Thank you for saving my niece. Thank you for giving us this chance." David shook his hand firmly. "You're welcome here. Let's go home." The journey up the mountain was slow because Chen and the young brother, whose name was Wei, weren't used to the steep paths. But nobody complained. They were together, and that was all that mattered. When they finally reached the cabin, Chen looked around with approval. "This is good land," he said. "Good air, good water. We can build a good life here." That first night, they all crowded into the small cabin. Wei would sleep in Amara's room with her, while Chen would take the couch until they could build proper accommodations. It was cramped, but nobody minded. They stayed up late into the night, sharing stories of what had happened since the village was destroyed. Chen told them how he and Wei had hidden in the forest for days before finding other survivors. They had traveled for weeks to reach the refugee camp, facing dangers along the way. Wei had been so brave, never complaining even when they had no food or water. Amara told them about her own journey, though she kept some of the worst parts to herself. Her brother was still young, and she didn't want to burden him with the full horror of what she had experienced. She focused instead on how David had saved her and how she had built a new life on the mountain. The next morning, David and Chen began planning the expansion. They would build an addition to the cabin with 2 more bedrooms, one for Chen and one for Wei. David showed Chen his workshop, and Chen's face lit up. He had been a woodworker in their village, though not as skilled as David. He was eager to learn and to work. Over the next few months, the mountain came alive with activity. David and Chen worked together every day, building the addition to the cabin. Amara helped where she could, and even young Wei did small tasks, carrying tools and cleaning up wood shavings. The addition took shape slowly but surely, and by the time autumn arrived, it was finished. The expanded cabin felt like a real home now. Chen had his own room where he could have privacy. Wei had a room filled with books and a small desk where he could do his schoolwork. Amara had helped paint the walls and make curtains for the windows. It wasn't fancy, but it was comfortable and full of love. Chen proved to be a valuable addition to the carpentry business. He had different techniques from David, learned in a different culture, and together they created furniture that was unique and beautiful. People from the town began specifically requesting pieces made by the mountain carpenters. Business grew, and with it, their income increased. Wei started attending school in the town. At first it was difficult for him because his English wasn't very good and he was behind in his studies. But he was smart and worked hard. Amara helped him with his homework every evening, and slowly he began to catch up. He made friends at school, and David was pleased to see the boy laughing and playing like a normal child should. Amara continued her own education through correspondence courses. She had discovered a real talent for design, particularly in creating patterns for furniture and decorative items. She started drawing designs for David and Chen to build, and customers loved her modern take on traditional woodworking. One evening in early winter, as they all sat around the dinner table eating a meal that Amara had prepared, Chen raised his glass of water and a toast. "I want to say something," he announced. "1 year ago, Wei and I were living in a camp with no hope for the future. We had lost our family, our home, everything. Now look at us. We have a home again. We have work. We have each other. And we have David, who has become family to us." David felt emotion rise in his throat. "You're all family to me, too. This cabin was empty and lonely before. Now it's full of life and laughter. You've given me as much as I've given you." "To family," Chen said, raising his glass higher. "To family," they all echoed, clinking their glasses together. As winter settled in once more, the expanded cabin was warm and cozy. They developed new routines as a larger family. Chen taught Wei and Amara traditional stories and songs from their culture. David taught them all more advanced carpentry techniques. They celebrated both American holidays and holidays from Chen's culture, creating new traditions that blended their different backgrounds. Amara noticed that David seemed happier than she had ever seen him. The sadness that had haunted his eyes when she first met him was mostly gone now. He smiled more often. He laughed at Wei's jokes. He and Chen would sit up late sometimes, talking about philosophy and life over tea. One day, Amara was working in the workshop when Rita came for one of her regular visits. They had become friends over the past 1.5 years, and Rita was proud of how far Amara had come. "Look at this place," Rita said, looking around at the busy workshop and the expanded cabin. "A 1.5 years ago, you were a traumatized girl with no hope. Now look at you. You're thriving. You have family. You have purpose. You're even planning to go to college soon." "It's hard to believe sometimes," Amara admitted. "Sometimes I still have nightmares about the market, about the chains. But then I wake up and I'm here safe with people who love me. It feels like a miracle." "It's not a miracle," Rita said. "It's the result of one man's courage to do the right thing, and your own strength in choosing to heal and build a new life. You both did this. What will happen when I go to college?" Amara asked. "I'll be leaving them for the first time." "They'll be fine," Rita assured her. "And you'll be fine too. You're ready for this next step. You've built a strong foundation here. Now it's time to expand your horizons." Spring came again, and with it, big changes. Amara was now 18 years old and had completed all her correspondence courses with excellent grades. She had been accepted to a vocational college in the regional capital, about 3 hours away from the mountain. The program focused on design and craftsmanship, combining traditional skills with modern techniques. The acceptance letter had arrived in early spring, and Amara had stared at it for a long time before showing it to anyone. Part of her was thrilled and excited. Another part was terrified. She would have to leave the safety of the mountain, live in a city with strangers, navigate a world she still sometimes found frightening. When she finally showed the letter to David, Chen and Wei at dinner that evening, their reactions were exactly what she needed. "This is wonderful," David exclaimed, genuinely happy for her. "This is exactly the opportunity you need." "You must go," Chen agreed. "Education is the most important thing we can give to our young people. Your parents would be so proud." Even Wei, now 11 years old, smiled at her. "You'll come home and visit us, right?" "Of course I will," Amara promised, ruffling his hair. "Every chance I get." But as the start date for college approached, Amara's anxiety grew. She had nightmares again, though different ones than before. In these dreams, she was lost in a big city, unable to find her way home. She would wake up sweating, her heart racing. David noticed her fear. One afternoon, he asked her to take a walk with him through the forest, just the two of them. They walked in comfortable silence for a while before David spoke. "You're afraid," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Amara admitted. "I know I should be excited. This is a great opportunity, but I'm scared of leaving. What if I can't handle it? What if the city is too much for me? What if I have a panic attack in class?" David stopped walking and turned to face her. "Amara, do you remember when you first came here? You could barely walk up the mountain path. You flinched at every sound. You had nightmares every single night. Look at you now. You've grown vegetables, learned carpentry, reconnected with your family, completed years of education. You're not that scared girl anymore." "But I still feel scared sometimes," Amara said quietly. "Being scared doesn't mean you're weak," David replied. "It means you're human. The bravest people are the ones who feel fear and move forward anyway. You've already proven you have that kind of courage. You survived things that would have destroyed many people. If you could survive that, you can handle college." "What if I fail?" Amara asked, voicing her deepest fear. "Then you fail and you try again," David said simply. "Failure isn't the end of the world. It's just part of learning. But I don't think you're going to fail. I think you're going to succeed in ways that will surprise even yourself." His confidence in her helped. Amara took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay, I can do this." The summer before college started, Amara threw herself into preparing. She practiced her English constantly, making sure she could express complex ideas clearly. She studied design books that Rita brought her. She created dozens of furniture designs, each one better than the last. She was building her portfolio, a collection of work to show her teachers. One day, a customer came to the workshop with a special request. She was a gallery owner from the capital city, and she had heard about the unique furniture being made on the mountain. When she saw Amara's designs, her eyes lit up. "These are extraordinary," the woman said, examining the drawings carefully. "The way you blend traditional patterns with modern forms, it's exactly what the design world is looking for right now." "Who taught you this?" "Nobody taught me," Amara said shyly. "I just draw what feels right to me." The gallery owner looked at David. "Is she really going to college in the fall?" "Yes," David said proudly. "She starts in September." "Good," the woman said. "She has raw talent, but she needs training to refine it. I'd like to commission 3 pieces based on these designs. Can you make them?" David and Chen looked at each other, then at Amara. "Can we make them?" David asked her. "These are your designs. You should decide." Amara felt a thrill of excitement. Her first real commission? Yes, we can make them. Over the next month, the 3 of them worked together to bring Amara's designs to life. Chen handled the structural work. David did the fine finishing, and Amara oversaw everything, making sure each piece matched her vision. She learned so much during this process, understanding how designs on paper translated into physical objects. When the pieces were finished, they were stunning. Even David, who had been making furniture for 20 years, was impressed. They delivered them to the gallery, and the owner was thrilled. She paid them more than they had expected and told Amara that she wanted more pieces in the future. "You have a real gift," she told Amara. "Don't waste it. Study hard at college and develop your skills. I think you could have a successful career as a designer." Those words stayed with Amara. For the first time, she began to see herself not just as a survivor, but as someone with a future full of possibilities. She wasn't just the girl who had been rescued. She was Amara, a designer with talent and potential. As August ended and September approached, the family helped Amara prepare to leave. Chen bought her new clothes suitable for city life. We helped her pack her belongings. David built her a beautiful wooden trunk to store her things, decorating it with a carved pattern that represented her journey from darkness to light. The night before she left, they had a special dinner. Amara had cooked her mother's recipes, foods from her childhood that reminded her of home. They ate slowly, savoring every bite, nobody wanting the evening to end. After dinner, Chen presented Amara with a gift. It was a necklace that had belonged to her mother. He had kept it safe all this time, waiting for the right moment to give it to her. "Your mother wore this every day," Chen said, his voice thick with emotion. "She would want you to have it as you start this new chapter of your life." Amara held the necklace with trembling hands. It was simple, just a small pendant on a silver chain, but it was priceless to her. She put it on and felt closer to her mother than she had in years. Wei gave her a drawing he had made. It showed the cabin, the workshop, and all of them standing together in front of it. At the bottom, he had written in careful letters, "Our family, always." "So you don't forget us," Wei said, trying to sound brave even though his eyes were watery. "I could never forget you," Amara said, hugging him tightly. "You're my little brother. I'll carry you in my heart wherever I go." Finally, David gave her his gift. It was a wooden box, beautifully crafted, with small compartments inside for organizing art supplies and drawing tools. "For your designs," he said simply. "Every artist needs good tools and a good place to keep them." Amara hugged him, and for a moment neither of them could speak. Finally, David pulled back and looked at her seriously. "I need you to promise me something," he said. "Anything," Amara replied. "Promise me that you'll call if you need help. Promise me that if things get hard, you won't struggle alone. We're your family. We're here for you always, I promise," Amara said. "And thank you, David. Thank you for everything. You didn't just save my life that day at the market. You gave me a reason to want to live." The next morning, they all made the journey down the mountain together. David had borrowed a truck from a friend in town to drive Amara to the city. Chen and Wei came along for the ride, wanting to see her off properly. The drive to the city took 3 hours. As they got closer, the landscape changed. The mountains gave way to hills, then to flat land. Buildings appeared, first small ones, then larger ones. Traffic increased. The noise and bustle grew. Amara felt her anxiety rising, but she took deep breaths and reminded herself of David's words. She was brave. She could do this. The college campus was beautiful, with old buildings covered in ivy and modern facilities mixed in. David helped Amara carry her things to her dormitory room. It was small but clean, with a bed, desk, and closet. She would be sharing it with another girl who hadn't arrived yet. "This is nice," David said, looking around. "You'll be comfortable here." They unpacked her belongings together, making the room feel more like home. Amara put Wei's drawing on her desk where she could see it every day. She hung her mother's necklace on a hook by her bed. She arranged her art supplies in the wooden box David had made. When everything was unpacked, it was time for them to leave. This was the hardest moment. They all stood in the small dorm room, nobody wanting to say goodbye. Chen spoke first. "Study hard. Make us proud. But also take care of yourself. Don't forget to eat properly and get enough sleep." Wei hugged her tightly. "I'm going to miss you so much." "I'll miss you too," Amara said, fighting back tears. "But I'll be home in a few weeks for a visit." "That's not so long." Finally, David hugged her. "You're going to do amazing things, Amara. I believe in you completely. Never doubt yourself." "I won't," Amara promised. "Thank you for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." They left, and Amara stood at her window, watching them walk back to the truck. She saw Wei turn around and wave one last time. She waved back until they drove out of sight. Then she was alone in her new room in a new city, about to start a new chapter of her life. She felt the fear trying to creep back in, but she pushed it away. She thought about everything she had survived, everything she had overcome. 3 years passed like a river flowing steadily toward the sea. Amara was now 21 years old and in her final year at the vocational college. Those 3 years had transformed her in ways she never could have imagined when she first arrived as a frightened 18-year-old. She had become one of the top students in her program. Her designs had been featured in student exhibitions, and she had even won a national competition for young designers. The prize had been a small amount of money and, more importantly, recognition from professionals in the field. Design companies had started reaching out to her, interested in hiring her after graduation. But something else had changed too. Amara had truly healed. The nightmares that used to wake her up screaming had become rare. She could walk through crowded markets without feeling panic. She had even returned to the border town once with David, and though the memories were painful, she no longer felt controlled by them. She had taken her power back from the past. Throughout those 3 years, she had gone home to the mountain every chance she got. During holidays, long weekends, and summer breaks, she would make the journey back to the cabin. Each time she returned, she noticed small changes. Wei was growing taller, becoming a young man instead of a boy. Chen had expanded the workshop even more, and the carpentry business was thriving. David had more gray in his hair, but he seemed happier and more at peace than ever before. On one of her visits home during her final year, Amara and David took their traditional walk through the forest. It was spring again, and the mountain was alive with blooming flowers and singing birds. They walked to their favorite spot, a clearing with a view of the valley below. "I've been thinking about what comes next," Amara said as they sat on a fallen log. "After I graduate." "Tell me," David said, though he had been wondering about this himself. "I've had several job offers. Good ones from companies in big cities. They're offering good salaries and opportunities to work on interesting projects." "That's wonderful," David said, genuinely happy for her, though his heart felt heavy at the thought of her moving far away. "But I've also been thinking about something else," Amara continued. "What if I didn't take any of those jobs? What if I came back here instead?" David looked at her in surprise. "Here? But Amara, those opportunities in the city, they're what you've worked so hard for." "I know," Amara said, "but I've been thinking about it a lot. The city is exciting and the opportunities are real. But my heart is here. My family is here. And I've realized something over these past 3 years. I don't want to design furniture for corporations who only care about profit. I want to create pieces that have meaning, that tell stories, that connect people to something deeper." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I want to expand our family business. We could create a real design studio here on the mountain. I could design pieces, you and Chen could build them, and we could sell them to galleries and collectors. We could create something unique, something that combines traditional craftsmanship with modern design, something that no one else is doing." David was quiet for a long moment, processing what she had said. "Are you sure? You're so talented, Amara. You could have a big career in the city." "Success isn't just about money or fame," Amara replied. "It's about doing work you love with people you care about. It's about building a life that makes you happy. I've learned that from you, David. You could have lived in the city, could have made more money. But you chose this mountain, this simple life, because it made you happy. I want the same thing." David felt tears prick his eyes. "You've thought this through?" "I've thought about nothing else for months," Amara said. "I want to come home. Not because I'm afraid of the world anymore, but because this is where I choose to be. That's the difference. I'm not running away from something. I'm running toward something. Toward family, toward purpose, toward home." David pulled her into a hug. "Then come home. We'll build that studio together. We'll create something amazing." Over the next few months, they started planning in earnest. Amara designed the expansion to the workshop that would become their new studio. She researched business models and marketing strategies. David and Chen began gathering materials for the construction. Even Wei got involved, excited about the family business growing. Amara's final semester at college flew by. She completed her final projects with excellence and graduated with top honors. At the graduation ceremony, her family was there in the audience. David, Chen, and Wei had made the long trip to the city to watch her receive her diploma. Rita was there too, wiping tears from her eyes as she watched the young woman she had helped years ago achieve this milestone. After the ceremony, as they celebrated with a meal at a restaurant, Rita raised her glass. "I want to make a toast. 5 years ago, I met a traumatized girl who had been through unimaginable horrors. Today I'm sitting with a confident, educated, talented young woman who is about to start an exciting career. Amara, you are proof that healing is possible. that people can overcome the darkest circumstances. I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without all of you, Amara said, looking around at the faces of the people who had become her family. Each of you gave me something I needed. David gave me safety and belief. Chen gave me connection to my heritage. Wei gave me purpose, someone to be strong for. Rita gave me guidance and support. Together you gave me back my life. The week after graduation, Amara moved back to the mountain permanently, but this time it felt different. She wasn't arriving as a rescued victim seeking shelter. She was returning as an accomplished professional choosing her path. Her room in the cabin had been repainted and updated. It was no longer a child's room but a young woman's space, with a proper desk for her design work and shelves for her books and materials. Construction on the new studio began immediately. It would be attached to the existing workshop but with large windows to let in natural light, proper lighting for detailed work, and a small area where they could meet with clients. David and Chen worked on the structure while Amara handled the business side, creating a website, reaching out to galleries, and building a client list. One of her first projects was to complete the piece she had been planning as her graduation project. It was a hope chest, similar to the one David had made for her years ago, but with her own unique design. She carved patterns into the wood that told her story without words. Patterns that represented chains broken, mountains climbed, darkness overcome, and light found. Patterns that showed pain transforming into beauty. David watched her work on it in the new studio one afternoon. The sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating her face as she focused on her carving. He saw in her not the frightened girl from the market, but a strong, talented, purposeful young woman who had found her place in the world. "What are you going to do with that when it's finished?" he asked. "I'm going to give it to you," Amara said, looking up with a smile. "You gave me one when I first arrived. Now I want to give you one. Everything I learned about woodworking, about finding beauty in difficult materials, about patience and care, I learned from you. This chest represents my journey, but it also represents your role in that journey. When the chest was finished, it was breathtaking." The gallery owner who had commissioned Amara's first pieces came to see it, and immediately wanted to display it in an exhibition. But Amara refused. This piece wasn't for sale. This piece was for David. On the evening she presented it to him, the whole family gathered around. Amara had prepared a special dinner, and afterward she brought out the chest. "This is for you," she said to David, her voice thick with emotion. "You can use it to store whatever you want. Tools, memories, anything. But I hope when you look at it, you'll remember that you saved my life in every way a person can be saved. Not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually too. You saw me as a person when I was being treated as property. You gave me dignity when I had none. You taught me that I was worth something, that I had value, that I deserved a good life. This chest is my way of saying thank you, though no thank you will ever be enough." David ran his hands over the carved patterns, seeing the story in the wood. He saw the pain, the struggle, but also the hope, the growth, the transformation. He saw Amara's journey from victim to survivor to thriver. "It's perfect," he said quietly. "I'll treasure it always." As summer turned to fall, the new business began to take shape. Orders started coming in. The combination of David's and Chen's craftsmanship with Amara's innovative designs created pieces that were truly unique. They weren't the cheapest furniture on the market, but they weren't trying to be. They were creating art, functional art that people could use in their daily lives. Word spread. Design magazines wrote articles about the Mountain Studio, where 3 generations worked together to create beautiful pieces. Collectors began specifically seeking out their work. The business grew steadily, providing a good income for all of them. Wei, now 14 years old, was showing interest in the family business too. He had started learning basic carpentry from David and Chen, and he enjoyed working with his hands. Amara helped him with his schoolwork, and she could see that he was bright with a promising future ahead of him. One evening in late autumn, Amara stood outside the cabin, looking at the stars.